Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Arcadia. We are in Old Town and you're probably wondering why we're starting with a little tour. Well, that's because Old Town now has some custom signage. So we have Jefferson's Pharmacy here, Pete's Produce, which is our greengrocer, and I've done a lot more work on lots of different signs for the rest of Old Town, as you're going to see here. I'm really looking forward to diving in and getting on with today's build, which, as you can see, a lot still needs to be done to finish off these buildings. This is our old curiosity shop, the antique shop, i.e. and we're going to be doing a lot of like decal work and greenery and stuff like that, and just making a couple of adjustments potentially to the roof work on Old Town as well. This is the Book Nook, our bookshop. As you can see, I've gone for kind of like faded designs with some of the signages, so it looks like they've been here a long time and they're just starting to lose a little bit of their shine, but you can still read most of the text. And the Book Nook gets another sign here, and as you can see, you've got those little books behind the bars of the windows, which I think is a pretty cool effect now that it's all said and done. And when we add more into it, we've got a lot more to kind of show for it. This is the White Hart, which has a brand new signage, as well as a specials board outside, which I thought was a really cool touch, just to add a little bit more oomph to the build itself. And the final one is my favourite, the Old Town Confectionery, which I think looks amazing. It's probably my favourite build of the whole thing so far. So we're going to dive into our speed build, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's to come in this episode as we bring a new habitat in as well. Let's dive in. Alright, so we are starting with Pete's Produce, and literally all this is going to be is lots of fine detail work, so you're going to see a lot of repeating patterns and things in the way that I work, but I'm hoping that it's going to give you a good idea of how I layer up on my fine detailing in these builds. So you're going to see a lot of like decal work and a lot of ivy and things like that, just to really like give these builds a little bit of a pop and make them different from the other buildings within Old Town. Obviously, I don't want to repeat the same patterns too much, because then we just get into the area where everything looks the same again. So we're going to be using a little, like, a different number of techniques and stuff just to really give these builds some extra character. So I want to go with, like, very similar foliage and things like that, but we are just running up some grapevines on the side of this pharmacy here, which does kind of, like, back out onto the greengrocers. So I thought that might be a nice little touch, that we have, like, maybe some grapevines just poking on through here. Obviously, we're going to have to move that pharmacy sign up a little bit, but we have signage throughout. You will see these finished off in the actual tour, because I want to show off these custom signs, because I did spend quite a bit of time making them. And if those of you who are interested, I will happily do kind of like a little bit of a tutorial on how I create these custom signs. It's very simple once you know how to do it, but it does involve kind of doing a lot of like fine adjustments and things within Photoshop, and just cutting down some of your like canvases and things like that. It's a lot to explain. I'm not going to do it in this video, but if you do want me to show you how I do it, please let me know in the comments and I will happily oblige. I'll do like a little mini-sode talking about how I do all of that sort of stuff. Anyway, back to this build. You can see we're putting in some fine details, so I want to put in like a little tap here on the side of the greengrocers so that we can have some water and things like that. And we will put a hose, but it's going to look like it's been taken over by those grapevines that are poking through. Wheelbarrows are always cool, and because our sign actually says that Pete's Produce now delivers all the way through Old Town, we're going to put a little bicycle in here as well, because we're going to have deliveries of veg via bike. And I could put in the little trailer as well, as if they kind of attach that onto the back of the bike, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to pop the bike down here and you kind of get a little bit of a hint that that's what's going on. Moving on to the roof now, I wanted to put in a bit of exposed plaster, and I want to make use of the gutters that we have. Now, because my roofs have the little bit of an overlap, it's very difficult to get the actual conservation gutters working, which I really like. So we're going with the Planet Zoo ones, which, you know, when used effectively, they can still be very useful, and they fit this kind of style of roofing a lot better. Because you would imagine, as they get to the kind of end of that roof, really we don't need gutters on this one, because the gutters themselves don't really serve much of a purpose. You can see here me doing this weird little angle as it juts back in and then back out to the drain, and we move on to the roof. Anyway, about the guttering, they don't need them because they've got the eaves on. Really, the gutters would only be on roofs that don't have an eave, I guess, because they're flat against the wall, and you don't want the water actually running down the walls of a building. But that's besides the point. I thought it was a nice little touch and it was great to add it in. Next, we're going to be doing more roof work, and as you can see, we're putting in little adjustments in the windows here. I have left some of these white, whereas the other ones I've changed the colours to brown, just to give us a little bit more of a difference in the buildings. And then we're going to put in a couple of like wooden slats, as if these like repairs have been done on the roof and they've left wood up there by accident, or the wood has been used to repair holes in the wall, which isn't a great technique. If you're a builder, you wouldn't want to really repair a slate roof with a plank of wood, but we're working with what we've got here. I would imagine that these kind of planks of wood have just been left up there though. So again, coming in with ivy work once again, just to really give this a little bit more character. And the one thing that I don't want to do is go too over the top on the ivy. I think I've avoided it, but as I kind of progressed through the build, I was starting to worry that it was a little bit overkill. Even though this is an old village, you would imagine that nature has had some say in reclaiming its territory, but we don't want to go too much. We'd like to think that some of our staff have actually managed to do some pruning and cut back the forces of nature that are starting to reclaim the buildings. But the plaster work is a little bit different, so we do kind of have a little bit more scope to play around with bits where plaster's cracked and you have the stonework of the building underneath. Now this side of the building I'm pretty happy with. It's looking really good. There's a few more things I want to do, which is just going to be put a little bit more ivy on here. As this is the greengrocers, I think making it look particularly green, very much like we've done with the florist, would be a nice touch. So we put a little bit more ivy work in just to kind of hide any imperfections on this side, and then a couple of windows to finish it off. And as you saw in the community post, we do end up adding one of the African bead like fabric backdrop type things. Next, we're going to go round to the other side of this building where our shop is, and I wanted to make a dual Gulpy sign here so you can see the Gulpy logo on either side, so it was just a case of sandwiching two signs together. Obviously, where the straw is for the Gulpy slush or smoothie or whatever it is that we're putting in here, you have like a little bit of an imperfection there, but I'm not too bothered. Next, this old curiosity shop sign. I'm not particularly happy with the design of the sign, and I may change that, but I want to make it fit in with the environment for now because I'm relatively okay with how it looks. I just think it doesn't stand out as well as I would like it to. So we're putting in some wooden trims for this so it looks really nice and fixed in place, and then running a couple of pieces of ivy down the side, and once again we'll have some ivy shooting up the other way as well, so it just kind of looks like it's been this trimmed in piece. Now I want to create a custom awning for our Gulpy so that it looks a little bit different to some of the other stands we've got here. I tried just bringing up the awning and it didn't work, so it's time for a custom one. We've put in this cast iron planter, and we're going to fill it with some flowers and a little bit of like leaf matter and things like that, with our dwarf cornels going in as well. It's really like difficult to find some flowers that fit neatly in such a small space, because I don't want them to cut into the back of the building, and I also don't want them to droop over too much. So keeping in with my theme, the European and the temperate biomes, we don't have a lot of choice for these planters, so it's important to try and make them look different every time. We bring in some African wooden panels and then just kind of make a little bit of a box to cover up the cast iron, because I don't want that to show through. I don't have any cast iron kind of visible in the rest of this build, so it doesn't make sense to start doing it now. We're all using like wood, metal and various different bits of plaster, so I don't really want to start coming in with something that looks too different from the rest of the build. So we're going to frame this with some ironwork. These European, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called. They are they're like European banner supports or something. They have been some of the most useful pieces that I have like at my disposal in this build at the moment. I think they're just so interchangeable and you can use them for a variety of different things. So the awning was quite difficult. I played around with some fabrics and things and nothing seemed to fit until I went back to my European pack and used some of these, I think they're for tents, so you're actually supposed to stack these up, but if you flip them round and get that right angled edge just hidden, you can make a nice little awning for the front of these builds. Obviously underneath it doesn't look too good, but we're not going to see underneath it very often. And then once again we came in with our metal work and started just creating a nice frame for it, just to give it that extra bit of support, and there we have it, a nice new awning. Obviously we're going to attach it to the wall, so we want to make sure that there's some decent metal work going in there as well, and just lining it back up again to finish it all off. Now, I could change the colour of this. I think I might leave it white though, and then we'll put a nice gulpy sign that's kind of attached onto the edge of the awning as well. Next, we want to just decorate the roof a little bit, again bringing our ivy up so that it just intersects and sticks through onto the old Curiosity Shop sign, so it looks like something is kind of cut through and is starting to grow there. Now, the one thing that I don't like about the custom signage is I want to create, you can see with some of the effects that I've done, we've put like a texture on the back of it and everything looks a little bit faded. That's because I kind of want it to have this vibe that it's this old faded sign that's been there for quite some time. So we're coming around to the Book Nook and the photograph shop, which is actually just called Just a Memento. I thought that was a really nice touch. We have like enough of a nod to suggest that it's like a photograph like shop. With like a weird little, it almost looks like the Instagram logo there in that window that you can see there. But yeah, so for now we just want to decorate the doorway of our antique shop by putting in a few nice little touches of glass and stuff from the European pack, and then a couple of windows maybe just on the top there, which we will then come around, and again we're going to continue our ivy work going along here, but we're then going to take a little bit of a break from using so much ivy and just kind of moving on to different ways of making things look different to the rest of the build. I don't want to go overkill on it. I've already said this, so I'm just repeating myself, which I don't really want to do. Anyway, back on with this. We put in our windows. You can see there's some decaling issues here because it looks like the plaster on this building is sticking out a little bit too much, but I think we work around it, and all that I needed to do really was just adjust some of the woodwork as well, just to bring everything forward a little bit so that those decals sat nicely and weren't intercepting the windows themselves. A little bit of ivy covering the windows as well, and then we come in with another new planter using some of the smaller iron planters because the original large size ones were too wide and stuck through the bottom of the shop window. Just making some adjustments here. It doesn't particularly matter because all of these iron bits that are overlapping will then be covered by our periwinkle flowers, which we're going to use as a base for these planters. And this is just where I really feel like I come into my own as a builder in Planet Zoo, is making these tiny little detail adjustments. I'm not amazing at actual building work themselves, but I really like creating these tiny details that really separate builds from others. So it's been really nice to come and do that again. Coming around to the front, I wanted to put in this little guy, a raccoon, and I just wanted to give him like a nice little touch. So we put a gondola hat on him, and that was just about it really. I didn't really feel like we needed to do much more with the photography shop. It looks pretty nice. You can tell what it is, and yeah, I just thought we'd put a little guy there to welcome people. Also, the habitat that we're going to be creating later on, we're going to make a brand new habitat, and it's not for raccoons, but due to the new, I don't know if it's new mechanics or it's a bug. I'm not going to act hasty and say that Planet Zoo have kind of bugged the latest DLC, because I don't know if they have. They did promise there were going to be new escape mechanics where animals can get out and then start kicking bins over and eating food and stuff, and I just wonder if they've now implemented the ability for animals to jump over your custom barriers. This was always something that I thought might come in some sort of patch, but I think they've now implemented it, because my Kowalski's horses, the minute I loaded in after the new patch, they started leaping over the fence, because the fence was never high enough. But when you use a null barrier and then just put in a fence, it didn't matter in the past how big that fence was, they just wouldn't jump over it. Now they do. I don't think it's a bug. I think it's a deliberate change to the game, which I think is absolutely fair enough. We've gotten away with that for far too long, cheesing that kind of method. So we are making a couple of adjustments to our fallow deer and Kowalski's horse habitats. They no longer have them in. I'm going to just redevelop those a little bit at the end of this episode, and we're going to bring in foxes and raccoons because I think they sit much nicer in the central district of Old Town, and it just seems like an obvious choice for us. Then we're going to move the Kowalski's horses, the European fallows here. We're going to bring in some goats and a few other animals that would be traditionally seen on a farm. And they're going to form the outskirts of Old Town. So we're going to make a nice forested area. We're going to maybe adjust the path of the train a little bit. And then we're going to start an outer circle of farmland that will house all of those animals that we've already had and some new ones as well. So the Dahl sheep will be coming in. and a few other bits and pieces, few new habitats that's going to come in the next few weeks. So back to our old bookshop. It was just a couple of flags and stuff to go in here, and then once again I wanted to make this roof look a little bit more damaged than the others. So once again we're coming in with some of the conservation wood pieces and then putting a nice layer of plaster decaling underneath it to make it look like there's been some heavy damage sustained to this roof. That's now been patched up, but not to an extent where you could consider it fully repaired. And then again we came in with our guttering. I've skipped a lot of this because it was a lot of tiny adjustments, but you get the picture. We wanted a gutter to run all the way along here, stop at the bookshop kind of triangular roof that goes in there, but I wanted it to go right into it, so it was really, really right close to the bone. And then we brought these right angled pieces in that once again bring us down to the ground level and allow the water to kind of just leave naturally. I duplicated that and we put it on the other side. You will see that later. But once again, a few slight adjustments to our woodwork on this building, and then just moving the actual drain for the gutter up, putting in some more windows, and then we move on to our next part of the build, which will once again, more ivy work. Now, I'm going to skip through the ivy work. You've already seen me do it. You know how I do this sort of thing. So we're just going to move on to the next part of the build, which actually involves us expanding on some of the work we've done on the roof already. I wanted to kind of create something that would almost resemble a place where anyone who was coming up to do repairs had access. So just a tiny little walkway for staff to be able to climb up onto the roof and then come along here and do a little bit of maintenance or something like that. It doesn't look amazing, but I'm still leaving it in. I'm pretty happy with it. So what we'd have here is a little bit of a ladder that runs up the roof of the building, and then it kind of develops into a slight staircase, a couple of little metal steps at the top of that ladder, which then allows staff to just climb up onto this little roof portion. Now, I think this could do with a little bit more development, but for what it is at the moment, I was pretty happy with it. It was just a nice little thing to do a little bit of extra work on the roof, because I was doing a lot of ivy and a lot of like little bits of plaster damage and decaling and stuff. And I just thought I'd do something to separate this part of the build from other pieces. Now, what I could have done was just leave those metal struts in, and then anyone who was looking to get access to the roof would know that's where you kind of latch on. That's where you put your main ladder in. You can then climb up and use these little extra steps that are attached to the building. These things do exist. They are real. My interpretation of them isn't the best, but I was relatively happy with how it looked anyway. And when we zoom out and see a full picture of it, you can really see that it's different to the rest of the building. And I'm once again bringing in some ivy. It's such an easy thing to do, and it makes life really easy when you're kind of looking to decorate buildings in a different way when you have a lot of structures that are relatively similar. On the ground, everything looks different here now, but from above, you still have like certain similarities that I'm trying to eradicate by making little different touches. But I promise this is the last of the ivy you'll see. You might get a little bit more. I don't know if that's true or not. Anyway, we wanted to just trim the top of this. Obviously, safety railings and stuff would be important. These aren't particularly safe, so I might replace them with something a little bit more user-friendly later on. But imagining staff would be able to come up here, do a little bit of maintenance, do some repairs on the chimney and stuff. And again, these lovely autumn leaf litter that we've just had with the Twilight Pack coming in there, just to add a little pop of colour in between all of that greenery that we've got going on there, and a couple more damaged pieces of the roof. Then we put in our smokestacks for our chimneys, and once we hit play, that's going to look really nice. Over in our other side of the pharmacy, I thought about using some of these African bunting discs. They don't fit well enough, really. So we came in with the conservation lats and put in some white ones on the top floor of the building, just to make it a little bit more standout-ish with the rest of the build. I don't think it's something that particularly works, and once again, I don't know if I'm just being too critical here, because when I step back and look, I really like it. I think it's a nice contrast between the colours, the white wood and then that dark green background on the walls there. And it's just a little bit of a building design, really. It doesn't really add anything or take anything away from the building, and I don't think it's too distracting. So moving on, we'll get to our finishing touches here, which is to make the doorway of our habitat, and this marks the building of our habitat. So I'm going to tell you now, this one is for the striped skunk. It's a very small area, and having 2 skunks in, actually they don't have enough space. So what I might end up doing is just moving some of my exhibits to a completely new building altogether. I've already maxed out the space in here as much as I possibly can, so unless I remove something completely, it's not going to get any larger. So that's something that I may consider. For now, I'm just going to leave them in there. I'm only getting a yellow warning that they don't have enough traversable area in there, so I think we can cope with that for now. I do move this pillar out of here, and then what I wanted to do was make I guess it's a trapdoor type thing for the skunks, and this was really strange. I wanted this to be a backstage area, and this would essentially be their sleeping quarters. So we bring these African doors in and then just slide them up a touch. So what you would effectively have is, this is almost like a trapdoor, but it is attached to a rope. So it would be lowered and then raised using a rope. I put it in. The mechanism doesn't look amazing, especially when I then realized that the staff traversable area on this, obviously our staff aren't tiny people, so we then had to move it further up into the environment, which made it look even worse in my opinion. I still think it's a good idea, and I just think it might need executed differently. But we had lots of coils of rope, and then we lined it all up so that the rope kind of travels across the 2 areas here, and then it goes along and down into the mechanism. So effectively what you would then have is staff would be able to raise and lower this kind of trapdoor type thing to allow the skunks out into their open space so that guests can actually view them. Now, because it's a small area, there's not a lot of development we can do in the habitat itself without damaging the amount of traversable area that the animals have. I had thought about making a couple of tiers, but I'm not really sure if the skunks can actually climb up or what have you, or go up ramps and things, and I would have to get them to ramp up pretty high to make it kind of like a multi-tiered system, which would then maybe eat into the traversable area beneath them as well, so it may end up being much of a muchness, and we might end up with exactly the same amount of area as we had when we first started building it. But we're going to flesh this one out, and I'll carry on explaining how I want it to look, because it is right in the middle of Old Town, so we're going to need to do a few adjustments and just make sure that we still have it looking like a good habitat, even though it is right in the middle of the town and we don't have a lot of space to work with. I did put a rake in though. So we're working on our foliage to begin with, and you can already see that I've put a burrow in. We're using some of these brand new plants from the Twilight pack. Obviously, I've not done my mechanics research yet, so there's some props and stuff missing here. But again, it's all about just making sure there's plenty of foliage here, because there's not a lot we can actually do with this space. It's a very small footprint, and I don't want to make it smaller. But the wisteria trees are going to be fantastic here, because we can run them right up the side of the building as if the mesh on the actual backstage area is feeding that growth, and it's then taking over this side of the building. And the wisteria, obviously, it's brand new here. We've not actually used it in Old Town yet, so maybe we can actually start peppering that in throughout just to break things up a bit. But I really like how this all falls down into the habitat itself. And I want to do a little bit of base decorating here as well, with some nettles and some more meadow buttercups, just to finish everything off. The other one that we've got on the other side is the tick seed, putting in a couple of rocks there. Excuse me covering up our poor little skunk with that rock, but it will eventually reset and it'll be okay. And then the last thing we want to do, I was going to put in a water pipe so that it doesn't have to be filled up all the time, but it had such a large footprint, I decided to just go with a water bowl that hopefully our keepers will fill up regularly. and then putting in the bedding in the backstage area before moving on to some little bits of extra fluff just to finish it all off. So we put in a conservation board, and then we had to do a little bit of realignment on our wooden posts here for the support, but we eventually got that sorted. Then it was a case of putting in some hooks, and then we will put on some tools and stuff for the backstage area that our keepers, you would imagine, would use. As you can see, it does stick out a little bit too much into the actual stonework, so we have to do some further adjustments, but these are all minor tweaks, and it's just about working out what wooden piece we need to put into place and how we cope with that. Then I thought I'd put in a little water barrel just so that the keepers have access to that, so that they can then fill up the water bowl. And that was it. Very simple. Putting in a little bit of remapping so that I can see what's there, and I may actually remove the burger stand rather than exhibits, and then we can flesh out this habitat a little bit more and give it a little bit of extra space. But for the amount of space that we will be providing by moving that burger stand, I don't think it's going to be enough, so it may well be the exhibits that we have to shift. And I've got plenty of space that I can move them into, so that's not too much of an issue. Then we put in our education boards and a few speakers just so that we can boost the education rating for our skunks, and that's it. The habitat is done. It was a really quick one today, but I do have plans to build more habitats for the next few episodes. We're going to do a little bit of management now, and I hope you enjoy that. Before we go into the tour, I wanted to do a quick management update because it's been a while since we did one, and we are now up to episode 10, which means we've made some strides here. So, as you can see, our most appealing habitat species is the European badger, followed by our axolotl, which you don't know about yet. So I realised that funds were starting to get a little bit low, and things were getting a bit tricky. I've not taken out any loans or anything like that, but you can see now our current cash flow is 17,000. So last year's profit was minus 10,000, this year's profit is minus 2, but our overall cash flow is $17,000, and that's largely impacted by some of the new exhibit animals we've got in. You can see here we have animal transfer costs totaling a profit of about 20,000. Our construction costs for the year are pretty small, which is good. Loans, we don't have any. Our ongoing expenses are largely taken up by our staff wages, as well as some ride running costs as well. Entrance ticket refunds totaling 675. So our new exhibit species are actually in our old exhibit house. I don't need to show you that because nothing has really changed there. I've just put in a few more exhibits again with some donation boxes, and it's just to kind of try and keep things coming in. Our income is 16,000, 9,000 from ticket sales, 3,000 from ride tickets. So you can see the ride is paying for itself. That's fine. That's not something we need to worry about. Our shop income has started to slowly increase year on year, and our donations are coming in nicely as well, mainly from the Danube crested newt, which is on it in our exhibit, and our axolotls, which is again in the exhibit. We also have red-eyed tree frogs and the golden poison frog in there as well. Now these aren't blocks of 4 as yet. We are working towards that, and that'll kind of come eventually, but I will move that building at some point because I'm planning on redeveloping the entrance again and creating kind of like a little caravan park type situation there, but that's a long way off. I want to continue focusing on Old Town because I have already adopted some new animals that we're going to put in here. So as you can see, we have our axolotls at the moment. They're doing pretty well. We have 2 locations for them, but with 2 pairs in each one, so having money, we would be able to expand that into a group of 4. Our salmon pink tarantulas are doing well. The Danube crested newt, we currently have 2 breeding pairs in there, but one of them is about to reach old age and be infertile, so that's one that's taking quite a while to increase. European badgers, we've had quite a nice run on those now, to the point where we now have 2 of our own breeding pairs in there. I have just released quite a few of those because things were getting a little bit out of control. Our European fallow deer, I'm just moving back to our exhibits. You can see here we've got a load in the trade centre that are young at the moment, and that's looking really good. They've done very well. Giant desert hairy scorpions are doing okay. Giant forest scorpion, not too much to worry about. Poison frogs, we're bringing in like kind of a new breeding program there, but that's taken its time. Mexican red-kneed tarantulas are doing really well. The Kowalski's horse I have taken out of the habitats, and that's mainly because they've started jumping out of it. We have 2 raccoons ready to go in and 2 red foxes ready to go in. Red-eyed tree frogs and our striped skunk, which you have seen us build today. So, what's happened over here is we have European fallow deer in both of these habitats now. Just because what I want to do is start doing a kind of like exchange of breeding pairs and stuff, and making sure that we've got animals coming in and having a nice flow of that, so we can continue pushing that genetics level up. Down here, obviously, you know, we have the habitat we built today, which is for our skunks and the badgers over here. So we have 4 habitats, but only containing 3 species of animals. Next over here is probably going to be the area where we start to put in some new animals. We only have 660 meters squared for this area, which is not a great deal, but if we have a quick look over in our zoopedia, sorry, we can just have a look at our foxes and our raccoons. So, red fox and raccoons. Let's have a quick look. The raccoons, they need 210 meters squared, so they could go in here. And we can have quite a few before it starts getting a little bit dicey in there. The only problem is they have a climbing requirement and a water requirement, which will eat into the habitat area. So I think our red foxes are going to go in this area here. As you can see, we can have quite a few of them before it starts becoming an issue in there. So that'll be a nice place for them. Next up, our raccoons. What I've been thinking about doing is moving the quarantine into this building here, and just making this a little bit smaller and having an inside-outside raccoon habitat in this area here, because at the moment the only building in this one is our quarantine. So if we can fit it in there, we're going to be in a much better position, and I think that'll be a really nice thing to do. And that'll allow us to have raccoons in this area. Now, the Kowalski's horses, they're going to go into the brand new kind of like farming land that I'm going to put around the outskirts of Old Town. Now, one of you mentioned in the comments in one of the last episodes about it being possible to have kind of like a tower or some kind of like old tower buildings in the Old Town itself. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make some town walls for Old Town. They're going to kind of surround the area away from where the water is here, and that is then going to start kind of creating a brand new area. So outside of here, we're going to have some farmland with the town walls on the other side of the farms themselves. So farms will be within Old Town itself, on the like behind the walls. So what you would essentially get is a gateway coming into the town, then the farms, then the main town here. And it also brings up some interesting questions about what we do with the train track. Because at the moment, having the train cut through here and cut around, we lose quite a little bit of real estate for the edge here. Which means we're probably going to do something a little bit different with the trains, and maybe have this loop here coming out of the town go a little bit of a wider arc all the way around, which means we could then put in an extra station on one side here, and that's where our farmland will start and where we have our Kowalski's horses. It also raises the question of these bridges in Old Town. What do we do with them? Because what I would then like to do is kind of make a little dock somewhere, maybe on this island, and have a boat tour that goes around, so that the Kowalski's horses would then back out onto this area here, and the boats could then go past. And what you would then get is the boat would take in views of what the red foxes here, if they can actually see it, Kowalski's horses here, something else here, and then something else here. And that would allow us to have maybe Kowalski's horses, Dahl sheep, and then something else. Maybe llamas would go there as opposed to this original area that I had here. Then we can have 3 farms on this area, and maybe we just have some nice town walls going along here that guests can then go up onto, and then on the other side we have more habitats. So that's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. As you can see, this main island of Old Town is just about finished. Obviously I'm going to put in a few trees and stuff off camera, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll put in some like fortifications going all the way around this island, so it doesn't look like just this weird sheer drop into the river itself. But that's kind of where I am at the moment. I'm going to leave you with a tour. We're going to have a little walk around Old Town, and then I'm going to have like a little bit more of a cinematic preview of our skunks in their natural habitat. Maybe as well, I will move the exhibits that are in there over into this other district of Old Town, or potentially this area here, because I would like to make the habitat that the skunks have at the moment a little bit better and a little bit bigger. That's why you've not seen me do any fine detailing on that building, because I'm still not 100% happy with it. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. We're going to have a little walk around and I'm going to stop talking now. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. We're 10 episodes in and I'm not short of inspiration at all for Old Town. So while this has been a slightly extended episode, I hope you've enjoyed it and you're looking forward to the next one. I will see you next week when we build a brand new habitat. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.
Oh, però sì, spero che sei là.
Proverei alla guardata.